And we are going live in three, two, one. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the next episode of Daddy Chats Live, which is I really wish I could script and pre-record. With me today, I have the amazing History with Megs, and she's going to tell us all about her favourite castles. But before we get into that, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, so hello everyone. I am Meg. I'm known as History with Megs on TikTok, Instagram, got Facebook as well, Threads, and YouTube. So any of them, please check me out. But yeah, as Ryan said, I love visiting castles and different historic sites. I do quite a lot of that in my free time, but some of my work centres around that as well, which is really cool. So yeah, lots of cool castles, mostly in England at the moment that I've been to, but I've got some in Scotland I've been to. And earlier this year, I went to Belgium, the Netherlands, and France. So saw some really cool places there as well.
Brilliant, brilliant. I know a particular. We'll almost certainly get onto it at some point tonight. As I said earlier, your favourite is Versailles. Oh, is it your favourite, or was it just an amazing for content wise?
Oh no, it's hard because like each site obviously brings so many different things to the table. Obviously, you've got different history at each site.
Mm.
People who've been there. But I think Versailles was amazing in just the sheer scale of it. Like, it was incredible. I've never seen anything like that before. And I've been to like a few palaces, and cathedrals are obviously very grand often. But yeah, I think just the sheer scale and decadence of it was incredible. And I guess you've got the juxtaposition of that with obviously everything before the French Revolution and
Mm.
post that was going on in the country. So in some ways, like, obviously you'd be like, I can totally understand why people wanted to tear this down if they're starving, but at the same time, if you're looking at it through a purely modern gaze, it is beautiful too. So it was cool knowing about all the history that had gone on as well. Obviously I had like the Women's March at Versailles as well. A lot of my content focuses on women's history, so that was cool to think about while I was there.
I think yeah, the talking about women's history. I can remember our first podcast was specifically on destroying Henry VIII, which I think like your whereas mine I have the favoritism of Alexander. You very much has the reverse of hating Henry for very just reasons. He wasn't a nice bloke.
Oh, he wasn't. And just like, I think something unique to Henry is just how cringe he was as well, which sounds kind of harsh, but like, I feel like he just had negative riz, where like, across the centuries, I can really feel that.
The only reason he was dating or marrying anyone was because he was the king. Like, like that crown was carrying him. But yeah, obviously speaking of monarchs, they all needed castles to defend themselves, especially when the everyone else wants to kill you. So moving on to the main topic, let's see if we can stay on topic for this. I've not had one show where I've managed to keep it on topic. There will be a tangent at some point, but we'll start off with we've got 10 castles to get through. So what is your number 10?
You know what? It's all going to be a bit jumbled up, and this is a bit of a wild card. I'm going to go for Edlingham Castle. It's either Edlingham or Eglingham. I always get them mixed up, even though I've written it down loads. But that is in kind of Northumberland area. So it's more of a ruin now, but I think you can get a real sense of what it would have been like. So it was kind of created first as sort of like a manorial residence. So they think that the foundations kind of support that argument. And then it was built up as a castle later on because obviously you've got loads of cross-border stuff between England and Scotland at that time. So it was a medieval well. And it's a free site as well, which is nice because I think often these sites are very, expensive to get in. Kind of worth it, like obviously, and it's justified, with Tower of London and things like that. It's the upkeep. But yeah, this is a free site, so it's an English heritage one. You can go and have a walk around. There's this amazing part of it. It's kind of like falling over, or it looks like it's falling over a bit now, but it's not quite. So that's all supported. But yeah, you can walk around the entire site for free. There's a few different notice boards as well. And there's a really interesting church just up from it that's linked to it as well. So I think it's called St. Michael's, but I'll look that up. And yeah, that's got some lovely, lovely features as well. I think that's medieval if I remember right. But yeah, it's just a nice area for a walk. And a lot of nice kind of atmospheric feelings I got there as well. Like, it wasn't, obviously there's been loads of cross-border conflict, but it didn't feel charged with that kind of tension. It felt very peaceful, which is what I like in a castle.
Yeah, I think that's very like the castles I've been in. I would give that same sort of vibe. They've never, you would think a defensive like building fortification would carry a lot of horror to it, but the only times like I've been in Victorian era like forts, and they've had this really dingy feeling of squalor. There was one that was actually still an active army base when I was younger in the army cadets, that had this like we went down and you felt like you was in the Victorian like British Army, like you didn't want to be there. You're being sent off. You're going to be sent off to some part of Africa to fight people you don't want to fight, and they don't want to fight you. But castles have this homely, celebratory feeling. I feel, especially when you like look at the old hearths and stuff.
Yeah, I think absolutely. As you say, I think there can be a bit of a reputation for being spooky and creepy, and certainly some I've been in have felt like that. But many, yeah, I think you get a real sense of the community that's centered around the castle, especially if you've still got kind of the great halls extant and things like that, where you can really imagine so many people coming together to eat meals, to sleep, to talk, and for justice in the courts or not. So yeah, really interesting, I think, as you say, how you get that feel for the relations between people within these walls.
Yeah, and speaking of relations, all castles have different relations to each other. Yes, I'm getting good at linking all these segments up. It's only taken me how many? I've been 4 months of doing the show to get good at this. But your number 9, I know it's not really in order. It's just to get the algorithm because it likes lists. But your number 9.
So I'm going to go for Aden Castle, which is
Okay.
quite. So that is, it's not quite like on Hadrian's Wall, but it's very nearby. And again, it's in the Northumberland area. So you've got all of that cross-border conflict stuff. And this similarly was set up as a manor house. And really, it's more of a fortified manor house, but it is called Aden Castle, so it counts. That's another English heritage one. It's a paid site, but it's well worth going to, I'd recommend. And it's really, really quite intact. So it was used like as a farm, so like a farming family lived in there up until the mid 20th century. So it's all covered in, like, you've got actual rooms you can walk around and things like that. And it's got an amazing mantelpiece above a big hearth that I think that's either 16th or 17th century, and it's carved beautifully. And there's lots of an amazing, like, you know, where you get the window seats and you can properly look out. It's really atmospheric. You could just imagine someone, you know, from medieval times being dropped in there and seeing you. And they also do some cool art exhibitions with Northumbria University. They had one installed last time I was there. So that's a nice little. And it's got a very nice picnic area too, which I always look for with a castle.
I think that's growing up. Growing up working class, like it was always English heritage sites you'd end up going to, and it was all I've got so many fond memories of going out to the little picnic area outside a castle, and it's I don't know why, there's something quintessentially British about having a picnic next to a castle, isn't there?
Yeah, it's so nostalgic somehow, isn't it? I feel like, as you say, most people who are brought up here have at least done that once in their childhood. I feel like it's kind of a universal experience.
Yeah, it's definitely one of my favourite ones. So how would the castle be used in relation to Hadrian's Wall? Would it be? I'm assuming it'd be like a second line of defence, so to speak.
Yeah, so actually, this one was built a little bit later on. It was kind of like late medieval-ish. I'm gonna say
Yeah.
like 40. Don't quote me on that. And so actually, quite a lot of the stone from Hadrian's Wall was used to build it, as was often the case along the
Yeah.
wall. Carlisle Castle is the same with that. So yeah, you've kind of got that legacy of the Roman rule, and in a way, it's quite ironic. You know, this wall's been torn down or reused to create something else for a kind of military purpose. So yeah, that was often the case. But with the wall as well, you know, it kind of, you've got quite big parts of it still extant now. But yeah, it's kind of that physical deterrent. I think more than anything at that point, it was probably a psychological thing as well. And that there's this wall, it's very much a border sort of thing.
Yeah. One of my favourite things about like when you take stuff like Hadrian's Wall and it's rebuilt into other things as well, is a lot of people argue, oh, we should rebuild Hadrian's Wall, we should rebuild Roman sites, or like in my case, my local area, we have a place called Hadley Castle, which was used to build a lot of the homes and such. What I find amusing is when people ask, "Oh, let's rebuild that, rebuild like the Hadrian's Wall." You then have to tear down other historical buildings, which are now themselves like old.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. Because there's some really quite old buildings that have reused the stone. As I say, Carlisle Castle, that was first established like kind of as a castle in 1092. So, that's super old. As you say, you don't want to go ripping that down just to build up all again.
But yeah, and it just reminded me of the tree that got cut down recently. Sad. Although I believe they're trying to graft that. They're trying to graft it back together.
Yeah, like it's healthy enough to kind of not birth another one. I don't know what word I'm looking for. You know what I mean?
Yeah. There's a couple of techniques, I believe, and I know you can sort of squeeze trees back together. Yeah, that's not how it works. If you can put it back on top, and the way trees work, it will just sort of grow into itself again, and obviously they can bring a sapling out. But moving or up the list, what would be your number 8 for top 10 castles?
We're going to cross the sea for this one, and I'm going to choose Ravenstein Castle in Ghent. So that's in Belgium.
Okay.
And I went there earlier this year, so it was February time. So it was very kind of cold, damp, atmospheric, which I liked actually because it's built in grey stone, so it's lovely. It's right in the middle of the city. And that was a seat for the nobility in the area at the time. And it has loads of interesting history. So there's a whole room where it's talking about kind of the torture chamber of the castle and different devices and stuff, which is interesting, but obviously very grisly.
Yeah.
It had a great audio tour, which I liked, and I love a good audio tour. I feel like it really adds a lot to a visit. So they'd actually got a comedian to do that, so it was really funny as well as historical. So that was nice and engaging, and that's really quite intact as well. So you can walk all around the ramparts and look out across the city, and it's got quite a few artifacts in there as well. So you've got some like armor, you had some swords, some guns, and things like that. So that was a really cool one. And as I say, it was quite a big site as well, which you don't expect them to survive so well, like when they're in a city. But it had brilliant. I think it was rebuilt quite a lot during the Victorian era as well. But it was very sympathetically done. I think they'd done quite a good job, which we know the Victorians didn't often, even with the intentions.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd definitely recommend. And there was some really nice waffle places nearby as well. So if anyone's in the area, make a day of it.
I do love a good waffle, cinnamon and caramel, and with a bit of ice cream. I must admit, my interest did peak then with Torture Chamber. That was when I was. It's the common little boy thing when you're running around a castle. The 3 places I wanted to go to were battlements, armaments, and the dungeon.
That's the one. Who does? No, as you were saying, there's such evocative places, aren't there? Because you know some of what's happened in that very room, and it's often kind of awful but incredibly interesting stuff. It's human curiosity, isn't it? So I think that really is a part of any castle visit that's going to engage people.
I think it's because it also provides a complete, a sort of yin and yang comparison in your mind as well. Like you've got the homely and the happiness of the court that was like going on in the castle, and then down below there was some guy being paid to stretch a geezer who would normally confess to a crime he hadn't done just so they would stop torturing.
Literally, gosh, you can't imagine, can you? And I know, like, we have it all kind of in horrible histories as this sort of trivialized thing, but when you think back to it, you're like, that is insane. The way humans can behave to each other, gosh.
I think there's a book written by a German executioner, I believe, like where he just wrote, it was his diary throughout his life of how he grew up on the sort of, I believe it was on the streets, and then he falls into the job. He's an executioner's apprentice, and then he basically goes on and the reason this book is disturbing is a lot of it is just him casually listing, like, today I beheaded 2 people. Today I hung someone for doing, and they did this crime. And the reason it's disturbing, like, and I really if I remember the name, I'll put it in the description. But the reason this book's disturbing is because it's so categorically listed. Like, it's not he's upset. It's not that he's angry. He's not happy about it. It's complete apathy, and that's chilling to me.
Absolutely. That's kind of the most terrifying part, isn't it? If you get so desensitized to being like, yeah, just another head chopped off, it's disturbing.
Yeah. It's like, oh yeah, it's just Tuesday today. I'm doing hangings. Like, that's yeah. Life back then, it's one of those things where I always say how similar we are to our ancient historical counterparts, but there's also some stark differences.
Which, change for the better, I think.
Oh yes, definitely. But you're looking at change. We're changing from number 8 to number 7. What is your 7th castle?
So, cross back over the channel for this one and go to Porchester Castle, which is near Portsmouth. Yeah. So very much on the south coast, and that is a really cool castle. So it's got a really long history as well, actually. It's built on or near the site of a Roman fort. So when they've been doing excavations there, they've got loads of amazing Roman artifacts. So they have a little museum in the bottom of the castle keep. And I think my favourite item from that was a child's Roman shoe from the 3rd century, they thought, but obviously from the time. And it was tiny. It was like this big. But again, it's what we're talking about, it being so evocative and feeling that human connection. The historical place or a historical object can bring that forth in you. It was amazing. So I loved that about it. But it has like a really long history. So that was where Margaret of Anjou landed, I'm sure, when she first came over as a bride. Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn had spent time there as well. And of course, Henry VIII had been very nearby. I don't know if you visited on that occasion, but when the Mary Rose sank, because that's really close. And then it was used as a prisoner of war camp as well, around the time of the Napoleonic Wars. And you can see all of the graffiti that a lot of the prisoners have scratched into the walls and into the woodwork as well. That's still there, which was incredible. That was like spine tingling. But it's a huge keep and a huge complex. And it also has a church on site. That was a really old one as well. And that was lovely. And when we went, they were having a coffee morning as well. And everyone was really chatty and welcoming and nice, which added a lot to the visit. That was super nice. And then you can go out kind of the back way and walk along the coast. So it's a castle that does kind of have everything. As a coastal castle, it was a pretty amazing one.
Coastal castles are always, I think, have a sort of almost fantasy feel to them, don't they? Like, you can just imagine that, like, the ships coming in and getting ready. Yeah. There is something about coastal castles that I definitely prefer. I think if we had, because we don't have much of Tintagel left, do we? Like,
no.
I reckon if Tintagel was still at its, like, the height of its glory, I reckon that'd be absolutely stunning and beautiful, to be honest.
Yeah, magical, because obviously you've got all the like Arthurian legend stuff around Cornwall as well, haven't you? So
that was one of the English kings were obsessed with being King Arthur, which is always ironic to me, given the fact that it was a Welsh legend. And if King Arthur was a real person, he most certainly wouldn't have liked the English kings.
Yeah, quite true, yeah.
So, what would be your 6th castle? What takes the 6th spot?
It's hard when you're getting like midway, isn't it? But I think I want to go for Richmond Castle, which is in Richmond. So there's a lot left of that one too, and the keep is absolutely huge. So that's well worth seeing. It is set right in the middle of the town as well, a little bit like Gravenstein. So literally be on the street and then into the castle within like 1 minute 30 seconds. And like around it. It also has some really interesting cells that were used to hold conscientious objectors. So obviously that's more recent history, but they've done loads of work around the graffiti that they left there as well. And I think some of them were held there for quite a while. They weren't open when I visited, but there's a little exhibition that tells you a bit about it. That's well worth seeing. But obviously it's like a medieval castle as well, so it's got a really old history. And I think perhaps Henry VIII's son, Henry Fitzroy. I know he had connections to Richmond, and I know Henry VII did as well. So you've got that link. And I feel like it played some part in being a military training base, but I might be wrong there. And it has some link to someone in the Scouts as well. So there's a lot going on there. But it's a nice big enclosure you can walk around, and it's just nice. Again, a nice one for a picnic. So yeah, Richmond is up there, and like I say, you can get right up into the keep. There's a lot of stairs, so be aware of that if anyone's visiting. But yeah, it's lovely, very evocative, and you really get that feel for kind of like the feasting hall and all of that kind of thing. Even though it's not really furnished, I think it was one where you could certainly feel the history, if that makes sense.
That's something not a lot of people. I think you have to be a history buff to get the feeling of history when you're in a place. It's been a while since I've had that. I went to St Albans recently. I got that when I went inside St Albans Abbey. That I got, like, you could feel the history of the building, but I didn't get it so much when I looked at when I went to London, some of the stuff. Not that I dislike London and traveling on the underground. It's definitely not sarcasm. But yeah, while as we move on to number 5, if anyone in the chat has any questions about the castles mentioned, I don't know, I'm looking at the chat, that's why I'm looking that way. I should look at the camera. If anyone has any questions about the castles mentioned or any other castles you'd like us to talk about on the show, let us know and I'll read them out for you. But moving swiftly on, what is your 5th castle?
So I think for this one, I'm gonna go for Ludlow, which is quite near Wales, but not quite. And I went there earlier this year, and it's one I'd wanted to visit for quite a while because of the links it has to the Tudors, which probably my area of most interest. I love my late medieval, early modern, but Tudors holds something special for me. So that's where Arthur Tudor, who was the heir of Henry VII until he died, obviously, and Catherine of Aragon lived after they were married for about 4 months before Arthur died. And obviously it's got history before that and after too. But that was kind of my main reason for wanting to go, because I find those two so interesting. And it's like semi-ruined. So there's still parts you can get up inside in like stairways and stuff in different rooms, but not really any roof on most of it. But it's got a really, really cool old chapel as well. I think it's Norman, but I'll double check that, where weddings are still held today. So when we went, they were having a wedding in the afternoon and we visited in the morning, but they had all the chairs set up and everything, and it looked absolutely stunning. And I guess it's that kind of continuity that's special as well, isn't it? You know, I'm sure that chapel probably hosted weddings and certainly different religious services anyway when the castle was in use during, you know, its heyday, and it's still being used like that today. But that was a really good one to walk around. It has a great guidebook, and that's set a little bit up from the town of Ludlow, so it's an amazing approach. As you get there, you're kind of walking through the market street, and it's all cobbled, and it's kind of as it would have been probably similar in the medieval times as well. So you walk through that, and it's kind of set up on a hill, so it's an amazing kind of visage once you get there. Then once you get in, you can climb up to the top of the keep and look out across the whole town and the countryside. And you really get a feel for what a strategic position it was in as well, because you've got a river coming up this side, you've got an amazing lie of the land, and you kind of get a real feel for its sense as a protector of the town, or I suppose it would have been more of a village back in the day, but you know, that settlement, you can imagine everyone there if needed during a siege or something like that.
That sort of all of that stuff that always happened. All of that stuff that always happened. Yeah, that's history. Whenever I look back, especially at fortifications, how you would have like the castle, like the keep, and then you'd have the castle, and then you'd have the town and the villages outside. I always found a sort of sense of humour of you move in near the castle, so there's somewhere safe to go in case of attack. But because there's a castle there, now you're more likely to get attacked.
The ultimate irony.
I can't remember. I don't know if it's on the list. There's a car. It also began with, I think it wasn't Portsmouth. There was a car. It was one that Cromwell had torn down because it was one of the last royalist strongholds. And I remember that when he petitioned to have it torn down, it was the local township like went and did it themselves because they were so fed up of every time there was like an engagement on near them, the people would sack the town for food on their way up to the castle.
I'm kind of here for that autonomy from the people, though. Like, we're here for that. Good for them in a
Yeah.
way.
I mean, for us, it's very bad because we lost the castle, but for them, I understand the reasoning behind it. And you're number fourth on castles.
So I'm gonna go for Broome Castle for this one, and it's in Cumbria. So if anyone's been to Centre Parks near Penrith, it's very close to there. I know that's quite a popular Centre Parks. So it's on kind of like this dual carriageway, but it is set back a little bit. You can see the flag waving as you drive past. But that's an incredible one. So that's again on the site or very near to a Roman fort, and you can actually see the earthworks of like the fort when you're up at the top of the keep, which is amazing to see. And its most famous resident was probably Lady Anne Clifford. I feel like she's having a bit of a moment at the minute. People are kind of getting to recognise her a bit more. Her portrait is in the National Portrait Gallery as well. But basically, she was born in 1590, and as a little girl, she was a favourite of Elizabeth I, so she did spend time at the royal court. But basically, not her entire life, but a large part of her life was spent in this struggle in trying to claim her inheritance, because her father had like a really weird will, or some male relative had, I can't remember exactly, where it was saying that this person can inherit and this person can't. So it was loads of like legalities, but eventually she did get her inheritance, and Broome Castle was part of that. So she did live here for a time here. Well, I'm not there now, but I've been there. She did for a time, and it's incredible. There's quite a lot of it you can get into. So it's semi-ruined, as I say, but you can get to the very top of the keep and walk around. It is a bit leery though, because it's all like hollowed out in the middle. There's no floors, and it's really just like walkways around the four walls. So if you don't like heights, don't go up there. But that has a little museum as well. So they found a couple of Roman gravestones in there. And like how we were talking about Hadrian's Wall being reused, stone from this fort was reused too. So there's a part of the keep where you go up, and there's a slab that's used in part of the ceiling, and that was a gravestone as well, a Roman gravestone, because they've translated the Latin on it. I can't remember exactly who it was to, but it'll probably be on the website. So that was really cool to see as well. There's lots of these hidden gems around it. So yeah, that was an amazing one. And when I went during the spring, there was loads of these little purple flowers growing everywhere, and there was little lambs in the field outside as well. So it really felt kind of fairy tale-esque. It was lovely.
I think that's definitely one of my favourite things, especially about English castles. Because whenever you see like a lot of people who've played the Dragon Age series, or I think it's the big castle you go, Sky something or other, and I don't think people realise how a lot of those fantasy castles, especially if you look well, aside from Lord of the Rings, because that's more based on like Greco-Roman structures in Constantinople and whatnot. Fun fact: I believe Minas Tirith is based off of old school Constantinople. There'll be a Lord of the Rings nerd to correct me on that in the comments. But yeah, no, I don't think people realise how much like that's where our image of a big fantasy castle comes from, these sort of places.
Yeah, I think that's it. Like you say, there's always an origin, isn't there? And I think often when people think of castle, they think fairy tale. I think unless you're into your history, you've got, I feel like Disney kind of took it over, which, is great for kind of building up the profile of castles. But I think that's many people's first thought, because that's what you grow up with. And it's only later when you start looking into the history that you realise, oh, this was real life and this is where this came from.
And we do have, I'm not sure if it's a comment or a question, but from Smokefit Fairy Tales, otherwise known as Trip Ainsworth, a very common guest on the show. He says, "I like the stereotype of alligators in the moat." He is American. Just for clarification, context. Alligators in the moat, even though that only happened twice, and that was in the Spanish New World. I don't know anything about that. I'm not gonna lie.
Nor do I, but I would love to know. That sounds very interesting and slightly scary. Gosh, you would be kind of looking at yourself crossing that moat, wouldn't you? You'd want a sturdy bridge, I think.
It's fine. I'm probably gonna have to message him after the show now and get him on. I'm gonna be like, you need to come on and explain this. Um, but yeah. So moving on, there isn't too many alligators in English castles. We did have ducks in our moats. I mean, to be fair, moats themselves weren't fun to cross. Like, given that they were full of sewage and everything else.
Oh yeah, gosh, you would not want. You'd probably get ill just by crossing it. To be honest, a lot of the time, wouldn't you? The amount of disgusting things in there, which is another line of defense if you're in the castle.
I think that's something that's also it's very Disney-fied, isn't it? Like the idea, like the moat around the castle, whereas in real life you kind of want a dirty, disgusting moat because, like, if people's only choice is the heavily defended like walkway you've got or the moat, you're gonna choose the heavily defended because I'd rather be
Yeah.
shot with an arrow than covered in everything.
Yeah, right, all of that. Absolutely not.
But yeah, well, we on in your third place, the top three now. I'm amazed. We haven't done Versailles yet, have we? No.
We haven't. I don't know if I can count it as a castle. We'll see. We'll see.
I'll allow it. I'll allow it this once. I'll allow it
Okay.
this once. But if you put a French building at number one, I will have to judge you for that.
So, talking about moats, nicely on to number 3. So I'm going to go for Calaverock Castle, which
Okay.
is Scotland. I don't know if you've heard of it.
I haven't personally, no. A lot of the castles I know about are it's either they're down south, then Midlands I skip, and then it's Scotland.
Yeah. Well, yeah, Calaverock, southern Scotland, and it's an amazing one. So it's kind of like latish medieval one, but it's had different additions put on as well. So it's got a really nice kind of 16th century or 17th century sort of facade, almost like a palace facade, which is lovely. And that's partially ruined too, but you can walk around and get inside. There's quite a lot to see. And that's got a really cool moat around it. And it is a proper moat. It's full of water and there's fishes in it, which I loved seeing. And it's really cool because where you've got that castle, which was built a bit later, you can walk down a track, maybe kind of like quarter of a mile, half a mile away, and there's the foundations of an earlier medieval castle there as well. So it is literally just the brick foundations, but it's really cool to see. And there's a little notice board and everything. And they've got sort of an area of woodland that they I don't know if it's like conserved officially, but they're building that up to help the ecosystem around there, which is really nice. And they've got a little exhibition visitor centre too. So there's stuff about there was a siege of Calaverock, which is really well recorded actually, and that's taught scholars a lot about Scottish sieges around that time. And there's also a documentary hosted by Tony Robinson that they play, so well worth seeing. And there's lots of interesting stonework there too. So obviously, as I mentioned, you've got sort of what's like a mini palace, really. It's got loads of nice carved over mantles. And then there's things they've found as well when they're doing excavations too. But yeah, that's quite an evocative one in that I feel like you can feel the drama with that one because it has had a very dramatic history, obviously Scottish clans and stuff. And I'll say that as someone who's descended from all the Scottish clans, so I feel like I'm a little bit of a pass despite the English accent. So yeah, that's one that I would thoroughly recommend, and it's lovely just to walk around to. You do have to drive a bit to get to it, but it's well worth it.
I think it's the castles that are sort of hidden away. Like, it's cool when you've got one in the middle of. I've been, it's one of the big ones on the coast in Wales. It's like there's the city centre, and then you have the castle. And
It's Conwy Castle.
Sorry, Conway. Yeah, I think Conway. Yeah. I've been there, and it's just really spectacular seeing stuff. It's the only time I've had a similar feeling was when I was in Cologne in Germany, and you walk past a McDonald's, a KFC, and you come out the shopping mall, and there is this glorious cathedral in front of you. and I love that feeling of the clash of history and modernism and modernity. But there is something absolutely spectacular of driving up a dirt road to this like castle that's sort of hidden away. You almost feel like you're trying to sneak into it, and there's something magical about that, I feel.
Yeah, 100%. Like you say, that juxtaposition between like the sort of modern world, like you say, Mackie's classic, and
Mm.
then incredible. Like I don't know what kind of architecture Cologne Cathedral is actually. I've not been, but that's on the list.
I haven't
Um,
been. I've only seen outside of it because when I was obviously that was a uni trip, so it wasn't history related. It was film. I think it was actually there for gaming. Because the film course got to go on the same trip, but I didn't get to go inside sadly. But I will visit it one day. Hey, that could be a collab episode. That would be a really one. Um, your number two now. So we're getting. Oh, this has got to be. I'm expecting like Darth Vader's fort on Mustafar level castle now.
you know what? We have to go for Versailles in second place. It needs to be included. It was just such an amazing visit. As I mentioned before, just the sheer scale of it was insane. Like me and my friends who I was traveling with, we got the earliest ticket you could get, and we still saw nowhere near all of it. Like we walked around the house and stuff, but the grounds are insane. They're absolutely huge, and there's so much history in them as well. So you've got Marie Antoinette's Petit Trianon, which is where she spent a lot of her time. So you get to look around that as well, and that's kind of like a whole mini palace. And then there's the Grand Trianon, which is a whole other kind of palace. But then obviously you've got Versailles itself too. And there's just so much history in there beyond the building itself. You've got all the artworks, lots of artifacts, the architecture, the way things are decorated. You know, if anyone's into Rococo style and stuff like that, it's everywhere. You've got like chapels inside it as well. There's just like everything. It's mind blowing. It really is. Maybe it's also because like I don't know. I'm not like a billionaire. If I was now, maybe it wouldn't seem so crazy. But I think just knowing about the history that's gone on in there as well, with all of the royal history, and then obviously the French Revolution stuff, and then you've got stuff with Napoleon as well. It's just so much concentrated in one place that is so kind of overwhelming to every sense. It was, yeah, it was an incredible visit. It was incredible.
That is it's certainly I know I do tend to bully the French in a lot of my videos. I must admit that's you know I've got to honor the Cockney English ancestry somehow, um, but Versailles is one of those places just has an incredible history. Like how it basically started as just a little well for the aristocracy, just a little house, really, didn't it? And then it just over the centuries was built up.
Yeah, incredible. And as you say, like you've got so much of the royal history there. And like you say, Napoleon, if you want to bully him, you can do it at Versailles.
Yeah, and I don't know how we're gonna considering the scale of Versailles. I don't know how you're gonna top it for your number one.
You know what? I feel like this might come as a bit of a shock, but I think I can explain
Okay.
why. Number one, I'm going to go for Carlisle Castle, which seems slightly underwhelming after
Okay.
Versailles. Hard act to follow, but hear me out. There's so much history at Carlisle. So that's built on the site of one, possibly two Roman forts. There's like loads and loads of history there. And a lot of that, as I mentioned, is rebuilt with the stone. Sorry, the castle is rebuilt with the stone from the fort and from Hadrian's Wall. So as you go around the castle, you can see often which ones are the Roman stones. So they were dressed with a diagonal pattern, like cross hatching. And that's how you can tell which ones they are. And you just like walk around and you see like at certain spots and you're like, oh wow, that's a whole other massive part of history that's just in this wall. That's incredible. But you've got loads of interesting history in terms of the cross-border conflicts as well. So you've got David the First, King of Scots, died there, which I think is pretty well. It's not cool. That sounds kind of macabre, but you
Yeah,
know what?
to history nerds will understand. We're like, oh yeah, that's pretty cool, and then everyone else is like, sorry, what?
Yeah, that. And the keep is really intact. So because it's still an active military base today, actually, I think they still have a military presence there in terms of like territorial army and stuff like that. It's been really well preserved, mostly where the army hasn't knocks down things, which it tends to do, doesn't it? But you've got really well preserved buildings in terms of it being like a military base. So the keep, you've got all the floors and levels you can get onto, and on the second floor there's some amazing medieval carvings, and I think they were my favorite part of the visit because they're just incredible. So they date to the 1460s and 70s, so obviously deep in War of the Roses territory there, and they just cover these walls in between these two prison cells. So they were saying that they think it was a bored prison guard who did it, because obviously he had to guard the cells. He couldn't go anywhere, but he couldn't, just fall asleep or whatever. So it's just wall to wall is covered, and you've got like Richard III's boar, you've got the White Rose of York, loads of religious imagery as well. That's really interesting. So that just blew me away. I think that's what tipped it for me. But there's loads of interesting later history as well. So Mary Queen of Scots, that was the first kind of official place that she stopped off at after she fled Scotland. So it's got massive history in terms of that. Unfortunately, her tower that was there was knocked down by the army. It was like pretty much derelict, but you're like, guys, because you're not effort to keep it. Clearly not. And you can walk around the walls inside there, which I really like too. And there's some really good ghost stories about Carlisle Castle as well. So ask the guides, if anyone goes, ask the guides about them, because it was really interesting. And there's also a really good military museum on site as well, if anyone's interested in that. So you get kind of like 2 visits for the price of 1 in a way. And then there's loads of later history in terms of it being besieged loads. You've got stuff with the Jacobite risings. And also, people might know it from Claire Foy's episode of Who Do You Think You Are? She visited it, and that made me think, oh wow, this is really interesting as well. So there's lots going on there. It's a super site.
It's one of those ones that you're gonna hate me for this. My introduction to Carlisle Castle was watching Garfield 2 as a kid.
Everyone says this, yes, whenever I talk about it.
That's as you're going, I'm like, this is amazing history, but all I can imagine is Garfield in the middle of a Scottish siege. Just
I mean, that's valid though. It's like Garfield.
I think that though it raises a separate point on its own. It's not about a lot of people would put that down, but I think that's just if it gets kids in. Like, I know a couple of people who got interested in history specifically because of Garfield too.
Oh my gosh, we love it though. Exactly, we love to see it, and it's anything that can engage someone in a way overwhelming. If someone slams a textbook down in front of you, of course you're going to be like, no. But if it's done in like a fun sort of subtle way like that, then yeah, it's brilliant.
Oh yeah, no, it's 100%. Like I say, the thing that got me. Well, I had a thing for history before that, but with Horrible Histories TV, I mean, I've still got all of the Horrible Histories books behind me. I'm only 25 years of age, but I've still got all of the books.
No, I'm so here for that, and I feel like it's nice now we've got Ghosts on BBC. You can kind of progress because obviously it's all the horrible past as well. We love Matthew Bainton.
Yeah, Matthew Bainton. Every time I post about Matthew Bainton, I will immediately just see like History of Megs is coming. I'm like, oh, I wonder which post I wonder which post this is on.
He's just
Matthew Bainton is the universal. Everyone, I think my crush watching Horrible Histories is Martha Hugh Douglas. I think it's Hugh. Yeah, that was who I crushed as mainly when she was when she played Cleopatra and Boudica, because I had a thing for Boudica when I was younger. I was a weird kid. I was a weird kid. Everyone else was sitting there going, "Oh yeah, Sheba from Kim Possible," and that's me like, "Yeah, Boudica."
No, yeah, I was after Dick Turpin. We're on the same page. Don't worry.
Matthew Bainton in the Dick Turpin outfit is entirely understandable. And we'll finish off with a surprise question. Of all of the it doesn't have to be one from the list. Of all of the castles or historical buildings, which one would you choose to live in? And you can pick any historical time. So if you pick Versailles, you don't have to pick the French Revolution. You probably wouldn't want to be in Versailles at the French Revolution.
Yeah, not royal anyway. Oh, that's a hard question. You know what? I think I'm actually going to go for Hardwick Hall in Derbyshire.
Interesting. Okay.
So this is a wild card. Like I say, it's not on the list, but I think I would love to live in Hardwick Hall just after it was finished and had all been furnished and was all beautiful. So that's kind of like very, very late 16th, very early 17th century. And it is in my head a bit because I've just been doing my video on it, but it's just an incredible, incredible place. And even today, like, you could live in it today, really, technically, because it's all sealed in and everything. You'd probably be a bit cold, but we have electric blankets and stuff, don't we? And back in the day, you know, you'd have your fires and everything, but it's just beautiful. There's so many amazing tapestries. There's so much amazing artwork in there. And it's the longest surviving Elizabethan long gallery as well. So I just feel like that would be so fun. If you were throwing a party, you could run up and down, you know, people doing cartwheels, all sorts. There's just so much scope for fun in that building, which I love. And yeah, just gorgeous, lavish interiors as well. Like, if you want to be bougie, then yeah, I think Hardwick Hall in the very late Tudor period to early Jacobean period.
Did Charles II ever go? Because a party hall sounds like somewhere that he would want to spend some time in.
It so does, doesn't it? I know actually if he went or not. Yeah, we'll have to look into that because I feel like that's very much Charles's vibe, as you say. He would love that.
I am as anyone who knows me knows I'm a very staunch defender of Charles II because he's seen as the party animal king, but people forget like he was on the front lines in the Great Fire of London. He actually did a couple of bits for charity, and like he was very much felt for the English. I mean, he was declared King of Scotland first over Cromwell's because the Scottish were very much against Cromwell, which is nobody likes Cromwell. I will take any second to. I hate Cromwell I think I hate Cromwell more than you hate Henry VIII. I think there's a fiery hatred for Cromwell.
To be fair, like valid, he did.
Yep. My Irish ancestry is probably one of the very key reasons as to why I hate Cromwell.
Actually, I didn't even think about that with me, but yeah, on the same.
Yeah, I know he did. Oh, he did some awful stuff because I when I did the original YouTube video on Cromwell, one of the common things was you missed Scotland, and then I was like, I need to go back and see what I missed, and then I was like, oh wow, he did to the Scottish basically what he did to the Irish. Yeah, I will revisit it at some point. It's just I don't have the mental fortitude.
Yeah, it's intense, isn't it? I mean, yeah, it's a lot to cover as well.
I mean, if someone described like because I described Cromwell as Britain's most hated man, but most like it's 50-50 if you look in England. It's like gets worse and worse if you go to Wales and Scotland. In Ireland, everyone I've spoken to from Ireland, then they all know the name Cromwell, and it is like immediate, like the most hated Englishman.
Yeah, my friend, one of my best friends who went to school in London, she was taught about Cromwell. We weren't at my school; it wasn't part of our modules or whatever. But she said she was, and she said her history teacher absolutely hated Oliver Cromwell. And I think there's a song on YouTube that is basically like a hate song towards him. And she said, I just have really vivid memories of this song being played and being like, yeah, he was a horrible man.
Oh, it's one of those things. See, I said there would be a tangent. I'm just glad it's happened at the end. We actually got through the stuff, but one of the things that really angers me about Cromwell is he does so many horrific things, as does every other leader in history, especially in that time. What annoys me with a lot of historians that sit there and argue, oh, what he did was no different. No, he was worse than a lot of other leaders at the time. What angers me so much is when he proudly exclaims how he rejected the crown because he was so modest and so pious, and he was really upset by what the Puritans were doing, even though he was ordering it. But I'm so pious and I'm amazing, and I only have bread and water even though I'm living in the king's house. And it was like all this stuff where he was doing the same, like, but he was pretending to be good.
There's this living in Hampton Court, like...
Yeah.
Calm down.
The bread for breakfast will always make me laugh. When I read that the first time, I will always be like, "Oh yes, okay, yes, you're going over." I mean, it will also be quite funny that it's the only time in history that the Irish sided with the crown. I mean, like that's how much people like. This is how much to the Americans watching. This is how much the entire island, both islands hated Cromwell. Was the Irish and the English aristocracy fought together.
It's crazy to look back. I feel like the English Civil War is really skipped a lot as something that's sort of like boring, but it's not. It's so dramatic and so interesting. Like, I think it kind of deserves more recognition, like especially within sort of the curriculum and just in general. I think like we need some films and TV series.
I mean, the only film I can really think of is I've forgotten his name, so I'm going to call him Obi-Wan Kenobi. The original actor for Obi-Wan Kenobi. It is called Cromwell. But I will admit, before someone says, Charles I wasn't a good king. He spent a lot of he wasn't a good king. Cromwell was worse. But then Charles II was. There's actually a really fun story about Charles II. So Cromwell, being a Puritan, was obsessed with getting rid of pagan iconography, and so he decided to destroy Stonehenge, which isn't pagan iconography. Paganism hadn't been invented by the time Stonehenge was being built, but Cromwell using intelligence wasn't his strong suit, and so he was having Stonehenge demolished, and there's a story, I believe it's Charles II turns up, where he turns up and he goes, "Oh, I'll let you know," because he's trying to get paid. He actually offers work. No one recognizes him because he's traveling in secret. I believe he's trying to get to France at this point, because for all our wars, France is immediately where a deposed English monarch goes. And he starts digging the hole. And what they were doing, they was digging the hole and pushing the stones in. All of a sudden, this particular time, there was a load of lightning that came out, out of nowhere, and a load of the workmen were in the tunnel, and then the wind gushed down, and one of the stones just squished a load of them, and Charles II saw it. I don't know how true this story is. I can't confirm it. This is the legend, and apparently that was a really weird experience, and Charles was like, "Okay, we're not going to touch any of this stuff."
Oh no, I want to know more about that. That's crazy.
Don't know how true it is. I can't say it's a verified source. It is one of those stories that sounds. It is, yeah, but it's one of those. It sounds like something a nan would tell the grandkids sort of thing, which I'm fairly certain is how I heard the story. But yeah, if it's true, it is an incredible one. Looking at comments before we go. But in the haunted bed instead of ghosts, the talking rat just tells you about Saxons until dawn. Oh, that's horrible. That's too
We love the rat though. What's he called?
Ratus Ratus.
That's it.
I love Ratus Ratus as a kid.
He's such a large part of childhood, isn't he?
It says a lot about the creators who managed to make a rat a cherished piece of everyone's childhood.
Yeah, especially in terms of history. I'm pretty sure they covered the Black Death and stuff, didn't they?
The Black Death song will forever be one of the best pieces of. Oh.
I just love all the songs. I love the Richard III one as well. I think that is hilarious. The way Jim Howitt delivers it is just incredible.
That song, it made me a staunch defender for Richard III as well. I like. Shakespeare, as much people say he was very good. He was very good at writing, but he was also very good at propaganda because he was being paid off by the Queen. And it's very. You probably disagree with me on this. I'm very much a House of York person when it comes to the Wars of the Roses. I'm not a big fan of the Tudors at all. Although I will give Elizabeth credit for when she met Grace O'Malley, which was the reverse of Cromwell. She actually did a lot. She reversed a lot of the awful ideas in Ireland, but it's very clear when you look into it. It's very clear propaganda against Richard III, which we're only just starting to unwrap.
Yeah, it's so interesting, isn't it? Because I feel like I've kind of been at both ends in terms of when I was younger. Oh my gosh, I'm obsessed with the White Queen TV series. I absolutely loved that. I am kind of weird on the House of York stuff because I feel like they definitely come off better in that. And I watched it when I was 14, so my developing brain really absorbed all of that. Yeah, I've gone from really, really defending him, being he definitely didn't kill the princess in the tower, to now I'm kind of I don't. likely, but I don't want it to be true.
From an unbiased, I'm gonna say I don't believe he did, but from an unbiased standpoint, logically, most kings probably would have killed them because they are a massive threat to the throne.
Like, yeah, that's it, isn't it? And I guess it kind of comes down to that a lot of the time, because
Yeah.
it's like hypothesize about Richard's personality and stuff. Like, we don't know. We can just go off the facts as, like you say, most kings, rulers would neutralize a threat if there was one, which is what it was. So, we'll probably never know, but maybe new research or archaeology will surface at some point. We know. You never know.
I believe King Charles has actually okayed the DNA test for the princes in the tower.
Yeah, I'd heard that. I don't know fully what's happening, because I think there's like a few different stages, isn't there? But it sounds sort of hopeful, doesn't it?
It will be. But what the question is, what happens if they're not? What happens if we conclusively prove it's not them?
I feel like then there'd be a theories being like they were changelings and the real princes did escape. I feel like really give rise to that, which would be super interesting.
Wasn't that Philippa Gregory's hypothesis as well in the book, and in the show? One of the younger of the two brothers escapes to France.
Yeah, I'm sure Richard does, and then she has him as being Perkin Warbeck, doesn't she? Who does eventually get executed. But I know there's some theories about him like escaping and just living sort of as, I don't think quite a peasant, but kind of like in the countryside, just a quiet life. But I don't know, because I guess even if it was proven that it was their bones, it doesn't prove that Richard did it necessarily. I mean, it kind of swings more in that in terms of probability, I think. But yeah, I think there's some things we'll just never know, probably.
I think just from the fact that he is a usurper, and usurpers almost always like there's when you've taken over, it's like not that I always do this, but to bring up Alexander the Great, like when he was sweeping through Persia, there was a couple of generals that were declaring themselves the King of Kings, and Alexander was like, "Why are you doing this? Because I have to kill you now. Because if I let you live, there's now the risk that because you've titled yourself this, you're going to be a claimant. And if I don't kill you, at some point to get your claim in place, the only way you can do that is to kill me."
Yeah, exactly like you say. It's that kind of catch-22, isn't it?
It just leads to everyone killing everyone, which is the same. The reason Rome rose, because if they didn't start conquering, they would be conquered. Humans would have got a lot more done if we were better at communicating.
It's always the issue, isn't it? Like, just talk like adults.
Yeah, it's I don't know if you're a Doctor Who fan. Did you ever see that episode, the Zygon incursion, where the 12th Doctor gave that amazing speech? There's a box and one's filled with buttons and the other is actually a bomb that will destroy the other species. And
child who was afraid of Doctor Who, so
fair enough. But this one episode, he basically explains that this is a scale model of war. So like, what happens is one of you will do the awful thing, and then eventually you will sit down and talk, and that's every war ever. And it had a really profound effect on me as a kid. I was like, that is like, looking back history, every war is okay. I'm going to attack you. I'm going to defend myself, and we're going to beat each other until we decide to sit down and talk.
Yeah, well, that's it. And you obviously remember it now, like you say. It's had a really profound effect. Yeah.
But that is Doctor Who. I mean, Chris Chibnall wasn't so good. Having a monologue about how guns are bagged, then having the Doctor fire a gun immediately after, and that's not how you write a show. Finishing off on the questions, because we are on the tangent there, and we have got a hard stop because it's about 7 o'clock now. But Alec Guinness. Yes, that was Alec Guinness did play. It was Charles I, who also played Hitler. I didn't know that.
Really? Gosh,
I need to look that up now. Obi-Wan Kenobi playing Hitler is an interesting idea.
I was saying Ewan McGregor, but he's not, is he?
It's the second Obi Kenobi, isn't it? His brother is apparently in the RAF, and his call sign is Obi-2 Kenobi.
No way! That's so funny.
it's so aggressively British. Um, Wolfgang's 100 says, "Don't anger the old gods." I believe that's in response to the Stonehenge story. There's some historical stories which I won't vouch for that very much. My favorite one is Pyrrhus of Epirus. He raided a temple of a goddess on his way back from Sicily, and all of his ships were destroyed in a storm. And that did happen. That is a historical thing. I'm not saying that the goddess did it. They would just.
It's strange.
I'm
yeah,
not.
well,
Sorry, go on.
I was just going to say there's the whole like curse of Tutankhamun thing as well, isn't there? And I've seen some videos on TikTok where people have been like, I was in this Egyptian pyramid and I felt like a presence tell me to get out. And like, there's definitely, as you say, sort of recorded evidence of things going awry strangely after stuff like that.
They're talking about the pyramids. One of my favorite stories. So allegedly this happened to both Napoleon and Hitler. But it may have also happened to only one of them or neither of them. It's one of those stories where it's like no historian really agrees on if it happened or not. And the story is that whichever one of them or both of them at obviously different time periods, went into one of the pyramids. They went in alone because the cocky leader thing, and when they came out, they were pale as a ghost and horrified, and they would never speak about what they saw. And the story with Napoleon's one is he saw himself at Waterloo being beaten because he feared being beaten more than he feared death. And the story is that Hitler went into the pyramid and saw himself obviously shooting himself. Again, I can't verify those stories though, so I won't just say that they're stories, but those are one of my favorites.
Looks crazy stuff, but yeah, super interesting. It makes you wonder, doesn't it?
And to finish off, last comment. I was about to say, even though I'm not religious, I 100% don't mess with stuff. Like I won't make a blasphemous joke in a church or anything. But especially with fairy circles, and if you grew up around grew up around a lot of folklore like I did, the fairy circles I don't mess with.
Yeah, don't mess, as you say, leave well alone.
I know it sounds stupid, but I'd rather not be take it to the other world on the 1% chance it's true.
Better safe than sorry, always.
And to finish off our last comment of the night, if you have got a question, be very quick, because we'll be finishing up soon. We've got George's 4, 3, 1, and 2. Yeah, from Trip, which is
Oh my gosh, that is such a banger, though, isn't it? And I feel like I learned that off by heart when I was like first watching it, and I feel like I could probably reel it off, if needed for a karaoke night.
We need to get a load of creators together and do a Horrible Histories karaoke night somewhere.
100%, 100. Get the whole discography.
Yeah,
I love George the Fourth song as well about him being regent. I think that is hilarious. Just like I say, Jim Howick, the actor, is incredible. He makes it so funny every time, doesn't he?
I think my favourite Horrible Histories actor has got to be Simon Farnaby. It's for his portrayal of Caligula. Like
they're just all so good, and you can tell they all have such chemistry between them as well. You can tell they all get along really well, and it's just like perfect, isn't it? It's amazing.
Oh yeah, 100%. They're like, if I could like get into any conversation, like people say, "What's your table of people?" I'd be like them, like those 6 people. But or was I going to leave off? I think that's it. Now we've covered everything. We've covered all the castles. We'll have to get you on again, and we'll moan about Henry VIII some more and Cromwell some more. But before we go, is there any closing thoughts? Any last things you want to say? And obviously, let everyone know once again where they can find you.
Just to close, I would say to everyone, make the most of it. If you can get to these sites, historic sites, any kind of historic site, absolutely do. And I'm sure I don't have to tell this to the people watching, but obviously it's always important to respect the surrounding area and the sites themselves. But yeah, history should be accessible and it should be there for everyone to enjoy. So like I say, I think just get out as much as you can, enjoy it, and yeah, learn about it too. Go home and research. I think that's all part of the fun. And yeah, as I said before, I can be found as at HistoryWithMegs HistoryWithMegs on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, Threads, and YouTube. So please do check me out. But thank you so much, Ryan. It's been a real pleasure, as always.
Thank you for coming on. It was brilliant to have you on again. Obviously it's live format this time, so I couldn't edit out when I got tongue tied. But yeah, no, yeah, definitely have to have you on again. But like I said, thank you, come on. And to all you guys at home, I hope you all enjoyed. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. And where's my button to end the live stream? I should have had that up already. There we go. End live.